My husband's will was a bomb, and it just went off. In the deafening silence of the lawyer's office, my son took the mansion, his wife took my life savings, and all I got was a one-way ticket to a mouldy old shack on a forgotten island. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. The day began with the smell of stale coffee and the hollow emptiness of a world without my Frank. We were a week past his funeral, a blur of polite condolences and plastic-wrapped casseroles. I was 68 years old, and my life, as I knew it, was over. I had spent 40 years as an art teacher, teaching kids to find the beauty in the ordinary, while Frank built our life in the quiet background. His lawyer, a man with a face as grey as his suit, sat across from me in a downtown Manhattan office. My son, David, and his wife Jessica sat beside me, their posture a little too straight, their smiles a little too wide. They were my family, my blood. David, my late husband's brother, was a trust fund manager who always looked at the bottom line. Jessica, my niece, was a popular influencer. She was live streaming this moment for her thousands of followers who watched from the comfort of their screens. The lawyer began to read from the will. It was like a movie scene playing out in slow motion. He spoke of assets and deeds and trusts. The words washed over me until I heard the phrases that would change everything. The Manhattan penthouse and Frank's entire art collection were now property of the D&J Trust, managed by David. The phrase, "for her well-being and future security," made my stomach clench. Then came the part that sent a cold shiver down my spine. The lawyer continued. And to Beatrice, for her personal use, Mr. Adams has bequeathed the fishing boat shack on Fisher's Island. Jessica let out a little laugh that she quickly tried to turn into a cough. I looked at her, then at David. He avoided my gaze. I had heard of the boat shack. It was a joke among the family, a run-down piece of property that Frank had bought decades ago for a pittance. We never even went there. It was his private little joke. Now it was my inheritance. My life savings, accumulated over decades, had been signed over to my son and his wife. The lawyer, a man without an ounce of emotion, handed me a single key. It was rusty, old, and looked like it hadn't been used in a lifetime. I held it in my hand, a small cold piece of metal that was the sum total of my husband's legacy to me. My family had left me with nothing. A widow in her late 60s, stripped of her home, her savings, her dignity, left with only a joke of a property. Jessica was already on her phone, speaking into the camera, a bubbly smile on her face. You guys, Dee and I are celebrating at our new beachside mansion in the Hamptons tonight. It's crazy how blessed we are. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was being live-streamed as a victim of their cruel victory. David, my own family, avoided my eyes as if I were a stranger. I stood up, my legs feeling like lead, and walked out of the office. The air outside felt different, heavy and suffocating. I clutched the key in my hand. It was the only tangible thing I had left of my husband, a tiny, worthless piece of metal. Little did they know, it would be the key to their downfall. The 3-hour drive from Manhattan to the ferry terminal felt like traversing worlds. I was leaving behind the steel and concrete where Frank and I had built a meaningful life and heading toward oblivion. The key, that rusty, useless thing, felt heavier than a gold bar in my coat pocket. It was the only thing I had to show for 40 years of marriage. The ferry ride to Fisher's Island was bleak. The air smelled of salt, diesel, and loneliness. As the boat churned across the Long Island Sound, I watched the coastline shrink, symbolizing the sudden, cruel retraction of my own life. I was 68 years old, a widow, and effectively homeless, banished by my own flesh and blood. David and Jessica had executed their coup with surgical precision, leaving me the laughingstock of their social circle. A taxi dropped me off at the northern cove. The boat shack was less a retreat and more an abandoned relic. It stood hunched by the water, leaning slightly, the salt-weathered wood grey and peeling. It was difficult to imagine Frank, a man of refined taste, ever owning such a neglected structure. A single dark window stared out at the cold, choppy water. This was my sanctuary, the place my family had designated for me to fade away quietly. I stepped out of the cab, the driver's skeptical glance confirming my low status. The island air was sharp, biting at my exposed skin. I forced the rusty key into the lock. It jammed once, then grudgingly turned. I pushed the door open. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light. The space was small, mostly concrete floor, and smelled overwhelmingly of mildew and old paint. Scattered in one corner were a few crates marked Frank's junk. I felt a sudden, cold wave of despair, the first one since the funeral that truly threatened to drown me. At that exact moment, my phone buzzed in my bag. It was a notification from Jessica's social media account. I opened the app, drawn to the site like a moth to a dangerous flame. The screen was awash in the warm glow of sunset over a vast infinity pool. Jessica, draped in white linen, was holding a champagne flute, laughing brightly. "Guys, look at this view," she cooed into the phone, turning the camera to the sprawling Hamptons mansion. $8 million worth of beachfront bliss, and it's all ours. Thanks, Uncle Frank. Sorry to my followers who are stuck in regular houses, but life is good. She paused, took a theatrical sip, and then added with an exaggerated sigh. Oh, and a big shout out to my old Aunt Beatrice. Hope you're enjoying that rustic little getaway. Maybe send us a postcard from your shack. The cruelty was deliberate, calculated to maximize the public humiliation. I closed the app, the image of the golden mansion searing into my mind, contrasting brutally with the damp darkness surrounding me. I needed to call David, not to beg, but to understand the depth of their betrayal. I found a shaky signal and dialed his number. He answered on the second ring, his voice slightly muffled by loud music. "Beatrice, did you make it to the island okay?" he asked, his tone annoyingly patronizing. "I'm here, David," I said, my voice flat. "I wanted to ask about the Manhattan condo. Where did the closing documents go?" There was a noticeable pause, and the music in the background seemed to drop momentarily. "Ah, yes, the condo. Well, that's actually settled. As trustee, I had to liquidate that property quickly." "Liquidate?" I asked, my blood turning to ice. "David, that was my home. That was my retirement investment." "It was necessary, Beatrice," he snapped, the veneer of politeness cracking. "The Hamptons estate, this $4 million property, it requires management. And quite frankly, the trust needed liquid funds immediately. You don't need a city apartment now. You have the island." His tone held an unmistakable note of contempt. "Frank was very clear that I control the funds now. It's for the greater good of the estate." The mask had fallen. It wasn't just about inheriting the money. It was about punishing me, about proving I was irrelevant, a simple-minded old woman easily dismissed. They hadn't just taken the house. They had taken my past and my ability to secure any future. I hung up without another word. The truth was worse than I had imagined. David and Jessica hadn't just been greedy. This was personal, and it was malicious. I looked around the desolate boat shack, the place they meant for me to rot. A new feeling surged within me, hot and powerful, drowning out the despair. It wasn't the bitter resignation they expected. It was a clear, cold resolve. They thought they had left me with nothing, but they had given me one thing they never anticipated: absolute, unwavering clarity. I had to find out why Frank had sent me here, and then I was going to fight back. The morning after my confrontation with David, I started searching the shack. The sun streamed weakly through the grimy window, illuminating the decades of neglect. I was looking for a sign, a clue, anything to explain why Frank, who loved me fiercely, would leave me this derelict building and nothing else. I began with the scattered boxes. They were mostly full of old fishing gear, rusted tools, and broken bits of wood. Frank wasn't known for being sentimental about junk, which made these forgotten boxes even more suspicious. As I sifted through a crate marked Summer '98, my fingers brushed against something smooth and unexpected. It was a block of cedar, carved with the rough shape of a bird, and tucked underneath it was a small, velvet pouch. My heart pounded. This had to be it. I tore the velvet open. Inside, resting on a faded satin lining, was a single, old-fashioned skeleton key. It was brass, intricately detailed, and completely unlike the rusty key that opened the shack's front door. This looked like the key to a grand old bank vault, or maybe a secret attic room in a Victorian mansion. It felt significant, heavy with purpose. Next to the key, nestled deeper in the pouch, was a piece of parchment. It was not a will, but a note from Frank. His familiar, elegant handwriting, which had faded somewhat, spelled out a short message. Beatrice, my love, if you hold this key, it means the hounds have arrived. This is where I go to think. The scent of linseed oil and turpentine will always lead you home. Trust the color blue. I am still here. I reread the note 3 times. The hounds have arrived. He knew. He had anticipated the greed of David and Jessica. Trust the color blue. What did that mean? The shack was mostly shades of grey and brown. I looked around the small space again, this time not seeing a ruin, but a potential puzzle box. The air, I realized, did hold a faint, lingering aroma, not just mildew, but the unmistakable sharp scent of oil paint and solvent. Frank, a man who never once picked up a brush, was somehow connected to painting here. I examined the walls. They were lined with cheap plywood paneling, painted a dull grey. I started tapping. Most areas gave a solid thud, but when I reached the back wall, behind the only rickety table, one section sounded distinctly hollow. I ran my hand over the rough wood, searching for a seam or a latch. Nothing. Then I remembered Frank's cryptic instruction. Trust the color blue. I squinted at the wall. The dull grey paint was peeling badly in this specific spot. Underneath the chipping paint, a small patch of color was visible. It was a faded, deep, ultramarine blue. I grabbed an old screwdriver and started scraping away the top layer of grey. The paint came off easily, revealing not just blue, but a smooth, seamless metal panel painted a vibrant blue, the color of the deepest ocean. The panel was perhaps 5 feet wide and 7 feet tall, completely out of place in the rustic setting. I searched the edges of the panel frantically, finally finding a tiny keyhole almost hidden by a protective rubber gasket. It was the exact size and shape for the brass skeleton key I held in my hand. My breathing became ragged. I was holding the key to Frank's truth, the answer to this whole elaborate, cruel game. I was ready to use the key, but my hands were shaking so badly I had to pause, taking a deep, ragged breath of the dusty, paint-scented air. With a sudden burst of adrenaline, I slid the brass key into the lock. It clicked, a smooth, deep sound that echoed unnaturally loud in the silence. I turned the key once. The metal panel didn't swing open. Instead, it began to silently slide sideways, retracting completely into the main structure of the shack wall. I shielded my eyes from the sudden flood of light. Beyond the opening was not another dusty storage space, but a breathtaking modern room. The air was dry, climate-controlled, and clean. This wasn't a shack. It was a carefully constructed vault, and what was inside made me gasp, completely stealing the air from my lungs. The room was Frank's sanctuary, his final project. My eyes fixated on the center of the room, where a single, massive canvas stood under bright gallery lights. But it wasn't the canvas that shocked me. It was what lined the pristine white walls. The room was filled, floor to ceiling, with dozens of the most incredible detailed golden works of art, sculptures of abstract human forms, and complex geometric structures. They weren't just gold-plated. They shimmered with the density of pure metal, catching the light in 1,000 dizzying ways. These weren't Frank's drawings. These were masterpieces worth a king's ransom. This dilapidated boat shack was a secret golden gallery, a hidden studio that must have been his obsession for years. In the center of the gallery, next to a workbench covered in specialized tools, sat another object, a small, sturdy industrial video camera mounted on a tripod, facing the entrance. It was currently blinking with a tiny red recording light. Beside it was a stack of blank-labeled videotapes. I felt a cold dread mix with the disbelief. This was more than just hidden wealth. This was the place where Frank had been truly alive, and where he had left his final, critical messages. The sudden brightness of the secret gallery was blinding, but the sight of the golden sculptures held my gaze. I stepped into the hidden room, the air here silent and dust-free, a stark contrast to the dilapidated boat shack outside. The room was not simply a storage space, it was a sanctuary, a fully functional artist's studio, complete with specialized lighting, temperature controls, and a high-security lock system I hadn't even noticed. Dozens of golden structures lined the walls. They were not conventional jewelry or simple bars of gold, but intricate modernist sculptures that Frank, the man who claimed he couldn't sketch a straight line, had somehow brought to life. Their total value was incalculable. I estimated the raw material alone was easily in the hundreds of millions. This boat shack, this piece of junk they'd laughed at, was the single most valuable piece of property in Frank's entire estate. I walked over to the workbench. The industrial video camera on the tripod was still recording, its red light a small, menacing eye. Beside it, the stack of labeled videotapes confirmed my dread. This wasn't just hidden wealth. This was a documented secret. I carefully stopped the recording and slid the tape out. The label was written in Frank's familiar hand. The Full Confession, Part 1. My hands were shaking again, but this time not from fear or despair, but from a cold, controlled fury. I found a small high-definition monitor and a vintage tape deck tucked neatly beneath the workbench. I threaded the tape. The screen flickered to life. There was Frank, not the frail, dying man from the hospital, but a man in a crisp shirt, sitting right where the camera was now, surrounded by the golden art. His eyes were tired, but his voice, though weak, was clear and determined. "Beatrice, my love," he began, looking directly into the lens, making the moment agonizingly personal. "If you are watching this, it means David and Jessica have won the first round. They believe they have everything, but they have fallen into the trap I set." He paused, taking a slow, labored breath. "They poisoned me, Beatrice. Slowly, subtly, over the last 6 months. They thought I was too old, too sick to notice. They wanted the full estate, and the only way to get it was to make sure I was declared mentally unfit, or gone." I pressed my fist to my mouth, stifling a cry. Poisoned. Not a heart attack. My own family. The betrayal was a physical blow. Frank continued, his voice heavy with sorrow. "I had to act fast. I liquidated every asset David knew about, converting the funds into these works of art. The gold and the diamonds are untraceable, not logged in any conventional ledger. I created an independent shell corporation, the Atlas Foundation, and the ownership of this entire building, the land, and the art inside is legally tied to that foundation. He explained that David, blinded by the perceived value of the Hamptons mansion and the immediate cash from my liquidated apartment, had never bothered to audit the insignificant boat shack. David only saw the $8 million market value of the house, not the complex financial instruments attached to it. Then came the second shock. Frank picked up a thick legal binder. "This Hamptons mansion, Beatrice, it is a poisoned chalice. 6 months ago, I took out a massive line of credit, a $6 million mortgage against the house and the accompanying land. I used that money to establish the Atlas Foundation and invest in a cutting-edge medical technology patent, something revolutionary that David would never have understood." Frank smiled weakly. The new will, the one they celebrated over, bequeathed the mansion and all its legal attachments to David and Jessica. They own the house, but they also own the debt. And the terms of the trust stipulated that any outstanding debts must be settled or refinanced within 6 months of my passing. That deadline is only 4 weeks away. They are celebrating a debt they cannot possibly pay. Tears streamed down my face, but they weren't tears of grief. They were tears of validation and furious resolution. Frank had not abandoned me. He had protected me, and more importantly, he had given me the ultimate weapon. Frank picked up a final object, a small, intricately carved wooden box. "This box contains the final key, Beatrice. It holds the registration documents for the Atlas Foundation and the official deed to the medical patent, which is now worth 10 times the initial investment. You must find a lawyer who is not afraid of David and use this to secure the foundation." He looked directly at the lens, his final words hanging in the air. "They thought they left you to die on this island. They only gave you the key to the tomb of their reputation and the beginning of your greatest project. Do not mourn, Beatrice. Act." The tape ended with a soft click. The silence of the Golden Gallery returned, even heavier than before. The mission was clear. This wasn't just about inheriting wealth anymore. It was about avenging Frank's murder and using his brilliant, complicated trap to destroy the people who had taken everything from us. They had celebrated their temporary victory. Now, the real game was about to begin. I stood there, 68 years old, suddenly an accidental guardian of a massive golden legacy and a murderer's final evidence. The weight of the wooden box in my hands was insignificant, but the weight of the truth it contained was immense. I knew I couldn't trust anyone connected to Frank's old life, especially not the attorneys who had executed the false will. David, as a trust manager, likely had deep, entrenched relationships in the city. I needed an outsider, someone sharp, hungry, and disconnected from the Hamptons elite. I spent the next 2 days in the Golden Gallery, immersing myself in Frank's final testament. I watched all the videotapes. They detailed not only the poisoning, but also the complex layers of the Atlas Foundation and the medical patent. Frank had poured his life's work and all his remaining capital into 2 things: art and a humanitarian technology that David would never appreciate. The 3rd day, I used the shack's ancient satellite internet connection, another carefully installed feature by Frank, to begin my search. I was looking for a young lawyer, someone in New York City with a clean record and a history of tackling corporate fraud. Perhaps one who specialized in pro bono cases or high-risk litigation. That's how I found Maya Sharma. Maya was barely 30, a recent law school star who had opened her own small firm after refusing a lucrative partnership at a major Wall Street firm. Her online profile highlighted a fierce commitment to justice and a history of successfully challenging large corporations in surprisingly complex cases. She wasn't established enough to be bought, and she was certainly smart enough to understand Frank's intricate legal trap. I sent her a cryptic email, using a burner account Frank had set up for me. I have evidence of high-level corporate fraud, a $6 million debt, and a secret inheritance worth 9 figures. I also have a video confession from a dead man. Meet me in Montauk. Bring a non-disclosure agreement. It was a bait and switch. Any sensible lawyer would delete the email. But Maya responded within 2 hours. I'm intrigued. Tomorrow at noon, Montauk Point Lighthouse parking lot. I met her the next day. Maya was wearing a simple blazer, her expression cautious but keenly intelligent. I had dressed in an old, unflattering tracksuit, leaning into the image of the poor old aunt they all expected. We sat in my rented car, the wooden box resting between us. After a few minutes of guarded conversation, I slid the box toward her. "What is this?" she asked. "This," I said, my voice low and steady, "is the Atlas Foundation and the future of David and Jessica." I gave her the bare minimum. My name, the fact that David and Jessica had manipulated the will, and that Frank had left me a boat shack that was actually a secured vault. Then I handed her the first piece of evidence, not the video, but the financial ledger proving the $6 million lien on the Hamptons mansion. Maya's eyes, which had been skeptical, widened as she scanned the documents. The numbers didn't lie. Frank had used a series of intricate cross-border holding companies to secure the massive loan, an action that was legally binding but totally invisible to anyone not looking for it. "This is aggressive," Maya whispered. "If this is real, the Hamptons property is a ticking time bomb. They're sitting on $8 million in assets, with $6 million in immediate liabilities. Why didn't they see this?" "Because David is blinded by arrogance and Jessica only sees Instagram filters," I explained. "They assume Frank's will was final and clean. They never checked the fine print on the property deed, believing David's own trust department handled everything." I then told her about the golden art, the vault, and the video confession. I did not give her the tapes yet. Frank had taught me to always hold the final card. "My mission," I told her, leaning in, "is twofold. First, to secure the Atlas Foundation and the medical patent, which is the real legacy. Second, to use the debt as a weapon. They stripped me of my home. I want their reputation destroyed, and I want them to lose everything publicly. I want the world to know the truth about what they did to Frank." Maya leaned back, her mind clearly racing through the legal implications. "This is a criminal case, hidden inside a massive civil inheritance suit. We can use the debt to force a quick sale of the house, which would ruin David's reputation in the financial community. But to prove the poisoning and secure the foundation, we need more than just this ledger." "You get me the legal protection for the foundation, Maya," I replied, my eyes locked on hers. "And I will give you the gold, the patent, and the video proof of murder." It was a high-stakes gamble. Maya looked at the wooden box, then at the vast, intimidating ocean behind me, and finally back at me. A slow, predatory smile spread across her face. "Mrs. Adams," she said, her voice now sharp and eager, "let's go fishing for a very large reputation." The next 2 weeks were a strange blend of high-stakes legal strategy and rural solitude. I remained on Fisher's Island, playing the part of the grieving, forgotten widow, while Maya, back in the city, began quietly assembling the case against David and Jessica. Our primary goal was to secure the Atlas Foundation and the medical patent before the 4-week deadline on the $6 million mortgage arrived. My immediate task, assigned by Maya, was to secure every piece of physical evidence in the Golden Gallery, and most importantly, to finalize the key piece of public manipulation, the socialized revenge. David and Jessica, meanwhile, were operating under the delusion that they were untouchable. They hadn't tried to contact me since my terse call to David. They were too busy enjoying their newfound wealth, and in Jessica's case, documenting every opulent detail for her social media followers. Her channel, usually dedicated to beauty tips, had morphed into a tasteless showcase of excess. Hampton's Mansion Life, my new $8 million kitchen. It was time to give her something new to talk about. One rainy afternoon, I received a secure message from Maya. She had filed the preliminary paperwork to legally recognize the Atlas Foundation and had placed a temporary injunction on the sale of Frank's golden art, citing discrepancies in estate appraisal. The legal maneuver was subtle enough not to trigger David's immediate alarm bells, but enough to give us leverage. "Now for the fun part, Beatrice," Maya's message read. "We need to make David and Jessica look like the fools they are, publicly and without them even knowing they are being mocked. You need to start your own channel." The idea felt absurd. A 68-year-old former art teacher launching a YouTube channel to fight her greedy family. But Frank's art was my weapon, and the video camera was already set up. I created a new channel, calling it The Last Project, referencing Frank's final testament. I decided on a persona, a quiet, dedicated artist suddenly compelled to share her hidden world. My first video was short, intentionally grainy, and deeply focused. It was a close-up of my hands, old and wrinkled, meticulously dusting one of Frank's complex golden sculptures. I never showed my face or the full studio. The lighting was dramatic, focused only on the geometric shapes of the gold, catching the light in mesmerizing ways. My voiceover, slow and deliberate, was the only sound. They say artists are defined by what they leave behind. My husband, Frank, he never wanted recognition. He just wanted to create. They took his life, but they won't take his final work. The accompanying text was even more cryptic. A private collection, decades in the making. The world will see soon. The Last Project. Golden Legacy. I posted it and immediately felt a rush of adrenaline. It wasn't about the views yet. It was about the bait. Less than 24 hours later, Jessica took the bait hook, line, and sinker. Jessica's follower count was huge, so she was constantly looking for content. She saw the hashtag and the mysterious gold. She must have assumed some rival influencer or a distant cousin was trying to create a viral trend. She posted an Instagram story, dripping with sarcastic amusement. She was standing in her massive Hamptons foyer, pointing her phone at an expensive, brightly coloured abstract painting she had just bought. "Okay, followers, I keep seeing this cringe hashtag, The Last Project," she said, rolling her eyes dramatically. "Honestly, what is this? Some dusty old garage sale art? Honey, if it's not dripping in diamonds and hanging in $1 million house, it's not a legacy. It's a hobby. Focus on the real gold, people." She then panned to her diamond-encrusted watch. "This is legacy." It was the perfect response. She had publicly dismissed Frank's life's work as a cringe hobby. With Jessica's public scorn now circulating, I posted my second video. This one was even more focused. It showed the camera tracking slowly along the surface of one golden sculpture, revealing the intricate carving and the pure, dense quality of the metal. The voiceover was short. Beauty speaks for itself. Value does too. I ended the video with a direct, though hidden, retort to Jessica's post. When you focus on the surface, you miss the depth. What looks like dust is often pure gold. The video went mini-viral, not because of its content, but because Jessica's massive fan base, many of whom were tired of her endless bragging, started sharing it as a quiet, aesthetic rebellion against her materialism. They didn't know the woman behind the camera was the very aunt Jessica was mocking. They only saw a mysterious, beautiful art project. Jessica was completely oblivious to the setup. She thought she was winning the online game, but she had just used her vast platform to amplify the very secret that would soon destroy her. The stage for the public downfall was set. All we needed now was the legal hammer to drop. The 4-week deadline was approaching fast. David and Jessica were still oblivious to the $6 million debt, sipping champagne in their mortgaged prison. The clock was ticking down to the mortgage deadline. David and Jessica were still blissfully unaware of the financial landmine ticking beneath their Hamptons paradise, too preoccupied with their lavish lifestyle and the upcoming summer of success party they were planning. Maya, my brilliant young lawyer, had been silent for 2 days, and that silence was more nerve-wracking than any loud argument. Then, late one Thursday night, a message came through our encrypted communication line. "Beatrice, it's done. The Atlas Foundation is legally secured. The medical patent ownership is unequivocally transferred to you as the sole trustee. David has no legal claim to either the patent or the assets of the foundation. We are safe. Now, for the real work, the takedown." Maya's next instructions were precise and bold. We needed to use Frank's art not just as a financial asset, but as the centerpiece of a narrative. The final fatal blow wouldn't come from a courtroom, but from a gallery opening. "We need a small private showing," Maya wrote. "Not for the public yet, just the hyper-elite, the kind of collectors who talk. We're targeting the art world, Beatrice. If Frank's work is certified as priceless by them, David's trust mismanagement becomes instantly undeniable. We need to create the myth of Atlas." I agreed immediately. I knew exactly who to call: Elias Thorne. Elias was an art dealer who specialized in uncovering lost masters. He was ruthless, connected, and most importantly, he had a long-standing, intense professional rivalry with a prominent collector who happened to be David's current financial backer. This was personal, intellectual warfare, fought with canvases instead of weapons. I reached out to Elias through a third party. The initial conversation was guarded. He was highly skeptical of a lost golden collection emerging from a remote island boat shack, but I sent him a single, high-resolution close-up photo of one of Frank's sculptures, a piece titled "The Betrayal of Icarus," a soaring form of golden feathers melting into a pedestal of rough-hewn stone. That was enough. Elias flew to Fisher's Island 2 days later, landing his private seaplane in the cove near the shack. I met him outside, again wearing my most dowdy clothes. He was exactly as I remembered him: sharp eyes, tailored suit, radiating an intimidating blend of arrogance and genius. I led him into the boat shack. He glanced around the mildewed exterior with a look of disdain, clearly expecting to find some amateur's bronze casting project. He stopped in front of the inconspicuous blue metal panel. "Where is it, Mrs. Adams?" he asked, impatience heavy in his voice. I simply pressed the concealed button, and the entire wall silently retracted, revealing the brightly lit, climate-controlled golden gallery. Elias Thorne stopped dead in his tracks. He didn't speak. He walked past me, his eyes wide, almost hungry, absorbing the dozens of glistening sculptures. He spent the next hour moving from piece to piece, not touching, but analyzing the craftsmanship, the continuity, and the distinct signature of a true master. He knew raw quality when he saw it. Finally, he turned to me, his voice barely a whisper. "Who is the artist? These are extraordinary. They are a statement. The metallurgical work alone suggests someone working with a vast private resource, entirely off the grid." "My husband, Frank Adams," I told him. "He was working here in secret for the last 10 years. "Frank Adams? The financier?" Elias laughed, a low, rasping sound. "This is impossible. Where did he acquire the raw gold? And why hide it in this monastery?" He didn't want the art world to find him until he was ready, I lied smoothly. And he certainly didn't want his greedy family to know it existed. They left me this shack, believing it was worthless. Elias looked back at the wall of shimmering gold, then at the decrepit boat shack exterior. A slow, terrifying smile spread across his face. He didn't see an art exhibit. He saw a legend, a scandal, and a massive opportunity to destroy his rivals. "This collection is not worth hundreds of millions in materials, Mrs. Adams," he stated, his voice now booming with authority. "It's worth closer to $500 million in cultural and artistic value. This is the stuff of historical revision, the lost master of modern gold work. We will arrange a showing next Friday. The world will be watching, even if they don't know they are watching yet. David and Jessica will be the subject of a very specific kind of humiliation." Elias Thorne was now my partner. He saw the potential for artistic chaos and personal triumph. We had secured the assets and found our public champion. The countdown to David and Jessica's financial execution was now set to the rhythm of high-end art chatter. They were about to lose their house, their reputation, and their peace of mind, all because they had mistaken a priceless sanctuary for a cheap, mouldy shed. The final week before the Hamptons party and our secret art show was a whirlwind of calculated moves. David and Jessica were escalating their bragging in a frenzy of anticipation for their summer of success. Jessica's YouTube channel was now exclusively dedicated to the mansion, featuring endless tours of the beachfront property, the yacht dock, and, most frequently, the massive, incredible library where they claimed Frank spent his final glorious days. Unbeknownst to them, I had a mole, not a person, but a highly targeted digital campaign run by Maya's tech contact. We focused on getting the Atlas Foundation's name, subtly linked to revolutionary medical technology, into obscure financial blogs read exclusively by David's circle of investment bankers. The goal wasn't to expose them yet, but to make David feel just a hint of professional paranoia. Meanwhile, Jessica posted a video that became the final, perfect piece of our public execution plan. It was titled, "My New Masterpiece, Out with the Old, In with the Gold." In the video, Jessica, dressed in an atrocious gold lame outfit, swaggered through the mansion, pointing out the tasteful, classic European furniture Frank and I had collected over decades. "Look at this dated velvet monstrosity," she chirped, kicking a beautiful antique chaise lounge. "Going to the dumpster, and this old, sad portrait of Frank's third cousin twice removed." She tore a beautiful old landscape painting, a modest but genuine work, off the wall and tossed it carelessly onto a pile. "Out. We need chic, modern, relevant art. Our style is the real legacy." The video was met with widespread criticism, even from her own fans, who recognized the blatant disrespect. But Jessica was too focused on the positive comments about her dress to care. She had publicly destroyed artifacts of Frank's life, demonstrating her utter disregard for his memory and his taste. My third video dropped 2 days before the private art showing. It was titled, "The True Cost of Beauty." This video was different. It began with the same close-up shots of Frank's golden sculptures, the betrayal of Icarus, the magnificent curves and flawless geometry. Then, the camera pulled back, revealing me, Beatrice, for the first time. I stood there, simple and severe, in the heart of the gleaming gallery. My voice was calm, but imbued with iron conviction. My husband told me that value is not measured by the price tag, but by the weight of the effort, the purity of the material, and the depth of the intention. Then, for a devastating 5 seconds, I spliced in a clip from Jessica's latest video, the moment she ripped the landscape painting off the wall. I did not mention her name or the location. I just showed the act of destruction. I continued, my voice now layered with sorrow and strength. They seek to destroy what they don't understand. They discard history. They mock silence, and they celebrate cheap substitutes. But some legacies are built on foundations that cannot be sold, cannot be discarded, and cannot be ignored. I concluded by revealing a massive, intricately carved golden plaque Frank had hidden, engraved with the words, Atlas Foundation, Investment in Humanity, Not Greed. The video went supernova. The juxtaposition of the raw, arrogant destruction shown in the clip against the profound, silent beauty of Frank's gold sculptures was devastatingly effective. People immediately recognized Jessica's Hamptons background and her gold dress. The comments exploded. The hashtag, the true cost of beauty, started trending, with thousands speculating about who this quiet, powerful old woman was and what the connection was to the arrogant influencer who hated old art. Meanwhile, Elias Thorne's private showing was a roaring success. He had invited only the most discerning and gossipy collectors in New York. The reaction was exactly what we needed: stunned disbelief, followed by intense bidding interest. Elias expertly framed Frank as the anonymous gold master, the eccentric genius financier who had secretly pursued art for decades, only for his collection to be mistakenly bequeathed in a flawed will. The buzz hit David's social sphere like a wrecking ball. His biggest client, a notorious art collector whom David desperately needed to fund his next deal, called David directly, not to ask about the market, but to ask if he was aware that his late brother, Frank, was secretly a contender for the next great American artist. David, utterly panicked, called me. His voice was no longer arrogant, it was edged with genuine fear. Beatrice, what is this nonsense I'm hearing? A golden legacy? What is this YouTube channel you started? Are you trying to embarrass us? Embarrass you, David, I replied, letting a cold smile touch my lips. I'm just sharing the beauty Frank left behind. You know, like an artist. That shack is worthless. Tell me where you are and stop this insanity. This is damaging my professional image, he demanded. The shack is everything, David, I countered calmly. But you wouldn't know that, would you? You already took the mansion. I paused for effect, twisting the knife. By the way, have you checked the interest rates on that Hamptons mortgage lately? The $6 million one? Just curious. I hung up before he could respond. The sudden mention of the exact debt figure, which he was legally supposed to be aware of but had clearly ignored in his haste to claim the mansion, was the final trigger. The clock had run out. David was no longer just dealing with a grieving old woman. He was dealing with the consequences of his own fatal arrogance. The mansion was about to be officially foreclosed, and his world was about to collapse. The silence on David's end after I mentioned the mortgage was absolute. It was the sound of a financial world collapsing. The arrogance was gone, replaced by naked, desperate realization. He finally understood that the Hamptons mansion wasn't a prize. It was a highly leveraged, toxic asset designed to destroy him. The official notice arrived the very next day. A notice of default, publicly filed, indicating the lender was commencing foreclosure proceedings on the Hamptons property. The 6-month deadline had passed, and the interest and penalties had ballooned the $6 million debt into something immediately demanding. David and Jessica's world fractured instantly, and their reaction was exactly what Frank and I had predicted: denial, panic, and aggressive deflection. Jessica, utterly dependent on appearances, tried to manage the disaster on social media. She posted a tearful, highly filtered video, claiming they were being harassed by a rogue bank and that it was a mistake regarding her Aunt Beatrice's trust fund issues. She tried to use her huge platform to frame them as victims of corporate injustice. But the narrative had shifted. Too many of her followers had seen my quiet, powerful video. And now the financial news was starting to pick up the story. David, meanwhile, focused his panic on me. He and Jessica drove straight to the Fisher's Island ferry and chartered a boat to the cove. They arrived at the boat shack around midday, their faces tight with rage and exhaustion. I was expecting them. I stood outside the shack, perfectly calm, wearing gardening gloves and holding a watering can, looking for all the world like a harmless old woman tending to her small patch of weeds. David, usually immaculate, looked disheveled. Jessica, devoid of makeup and filters, looked frantic and cheap. "Beatrice, where is it?" David shouted, charging toward me. "Where did you hide the collateral? That property is ours. You set us up." "Collateral for what, David?" I asked, looking him straight in the eye. "You inherited what Frank legally gave you, the Hamptons' property, as stipulated in the will. You just failed to read the fine print about the 6 million lien attached to it." Jessica stepped forward, pointing a trembling, manicured finger at me. "That old piece of junk you're wearing is a lie. I saw your video. The gold. Where are the golden statues? If we sell those, we can pay the bank." "Ah, the gold," I said gently, admiring the small, beautiful rosebud on my watering can. "That gold belongs to the Atlas Foundation, a separate entity, completely legally divorced from Frank's personal estate, which was liquidated and established 6 months ago. David, you failed to audit that asset because you believed this shack was worthless. You failed as a trustee." David stared at the dilapidated shack, then back at me. You tricked us. This was Frank's revenge, wasn't it? He wanted us to lose everything." "Frank wanted the truth, David," I countered. "He wanted you to face the consequences of your own reckless greed. And by the way, the Foundation's primary investment, a medical patent that will save countless lives, is now worth over $50 million. But again, that's not your concern. It's mine." Jessica, realizing the full scope of the disaster, let out a high-pitched wail. "This isn't fair. That house, that image, that's my life. You can't let us lose it. Your family." "Family," I scoffed. "Family doesn't poison a loved one to seize his assets. Family doesn't liquidate a widow's home and then mock her publicly." David's panic turned back to calculated menace. He lowered his voice. "We can still fix this, Beatrice. I can claim mental incompetence for you. We can invalidate the Atlas Foundation. I'm going inside that shack, and I'm taking that gold." He lunged toward the front door. I didn't move. "Be careful, David," I warned. "That shack is technically the property of the Atlas Foundation, which is legally represented by Maya Sharma. Any attempt to trespass, violate the security, or steal assets will be met with immediate criminal charges." He ignored me, pulling hard on the rusty door handle. The lock held, because Frank, in his wisdom, had installed a secondary industrial-grade bolt that was completely invisible from the outside. "It's locked!" David roared, kicking the rotten wood of the door. Jessica rushed over, tearing at the windows. "The windows! Break the windows!" They were so focused on the front of the shack, the worthless part, that they completely forgot the smooth, blue metal panel on the side, disguised as a painted wall. They were literally inches away from the hidden vault, but their tunnel vision prevented them from seeing the truth. As David continued to hammer his fists against the cheap wood, a small black sedan pulled up the dirt track behind them. 2 men in sharp suits stepped out, followed by a woman in a perfectly tailored business suit, Maya Sharma. "Mr. Adams! Mrs. Adams!" Maya called out, her voice cutting through the panic. "I am Maya Sharma, counsel for the Atlas Foundation. I am here to serve you with this cease and desist order and a temporary restraining order." Any further damage to the Foundation's property will be considered malicious destruction of evidence. David and Jessica froze, turning to see the professional, legal face of their downfall. The game was over. They had lost the mansion, and now they had lost their freedom to even set foot on the ground where the real wealth lay. Their public humiliation was sealed. The appearance of Maya Sharma and her team marked the definitive end of the fun part of David and Jessica's inheritance fantasy. David, seeing the lawyers, instantly shifted his panic into a familiar legal posturing. "This is baseless harassment, Ms. Sharma. You have no authority here," he spat, backing away from the door he'd just been trying to kick in. Maya didn't raise her voice. She simply held out the thick stack of papers. "Mr. Adams, this is a court-ordered temporary restraining order filed under the name of the Atlas Foundation, a duly registered corporate entity. It prohibits both of you from approaching the physical location of the Foundation's primary assets, currently located within this structure. Furthermore, the bank has officially filed foreclosure notice on the Hamptons property. You have 4 days to vacate." Jessica let out a choked gasp, clutching David's arm. 4 days! David, what about the party? The Summer of Success party is Saturday. "You won't be having any party at that address, Jessica," Maya said, a hint of steel in her tone. "It is now under the bank's jurisdiction. I suggest you focus on finding new accommodations and perhaps a new criminal defense attorney." David's face went white. The word criminal pierced his financial armor. He knew I had something more than just a real estate claim. "What is she talking about, Beatrice?" David demanded, turning his rage back on me. "What criminal charges?" I finally stepped forward, setting the watering can down. I looked at the two of them, not with hate, but with a chilling calm. "David, you were Frank's brother. You were his appointed financial steward, and you tried to take his life and his legacy for greed. Frank knew you would. He knew you would never look past the surface." "I did nothing," David insisted, though his eyes darted nervously toward Maya. "Didn't you?" I countered. "Did you, as the supposed financial expert, fail to notice the immediate $6 million liability on the property you so eagerly claimed? Did you fail to monitor Frank's health, or did you actively choose to ignore the gradual poisoning, just like you chose to ignore the fine print on the property deed? The difference between a simple, honest will and a calculated, malicious theft is intention, David, and I have proof of your intentions. I didn't produce the tape. I didn't need to. The fear in David's eyes was the proof. He was a cornered animal, realizing the trap wasn't the debt. The trap was the documented truth. Maya then delivered the final, decisive blow to David's career. "Mr. Adams, a report has been filed with the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority detailing your alleged gross mismanagement of the Frank Adams Estate Trust, specifically regarding the unauthorized liquidation of Mrs. Beatrice Adams's personal assets and your failure to disclose the Atlas Foundation's existence to your major clients. Your professional reputation is currently under review." David crumpled. The loss of his professional standing, the very thing he valued more than his marriage or even his life, was the ultimate defeat. The loss of the mansion was devastating. The loss of his reputation was irreversible. Jessica, realizing the audience for her life story was rapidly turning hostile, started screaming into her phone, attempting to live stream the chaos. "This is a setup. This crazy old woman is trying to ruin us. She's mentally unstable." But I was ready for her. I walked over to the side of the boat shack, pressed the subtle button, and the blue metal panel silently recessed into the wall. The brilliant light of the golden gallery spilled out onto the dusty ground. The sight of dozens of priceless, shimmering gold sculptures, geometric, powerful, and obviously not the work of an unstable old woman, was breathtaking. I turned the camera on myself, taking control of Jessica's own live feed. "My name is Beatrice Adams," I said, my voice resonating with Frank's unwavering conviction. "They call this a crazy old woman's shack, but my late husband, Frank Adams, called it his sanctuary. This is the art he created for 40 years, the wealth he saved from their greed, and the legacy they almost stole." Jessica's feed was flooded with comments. "OMG, the gold is real. That shack is worth billions. She's the artist from hashtag the true cost of beauty." Their last defense, the claim of my mental incompetence, was shattered by the brilliance of Frank's secret gallery. They stood there, two disgraced figures, framed by the contrast of their own failure and the gold that should have been theirs. Maya's security team quickly escorted them off the premises, serving them with the final legal papers. The moment they were gone, the air on the island seemed to clear. I walked into the gallery, the silence a welcome embrace. The golden sculptures gleamed. Frank's plan had worked perfectly. He had given them the shell of an $8 million debt and given me the core of a $500 million legacy, along with the evidence to finally bring them to justice. I had lost a husband, but I had gained a mission. The final phase, the criminal prosecution, was now inevitable. The aftermath of David and Jessica's public breakdown at the boat shack was immediate and total. Within 72 hours, they were officially locked out of the Hamptons mansion. The foreclosure process was swift and merciless. They were forced to move into a tiny, overpriced rental apartment in the city, the only place they could afford after David's assets were frozen, pending the FINRA investigation. Jessica's YouTube channel, once a beacon of aspirational luxury, became a pit of toxic comment threads and rapid subscriber loss. My life, conversely, was transforming. The $6 million debt had been the trigger, but the Atlas Foundation was the true victory. With the art and the medical patent secured, I worked with Maya to implement Frank's vision. The gold sculptures, valued conservatively at over $500 million, were not intended to sit in a vault. Frank's will stipulated that the collection be sold over 5 years, with all proceeds funding the humanitarian medical technology developed under the patent. The first sale, handled by Elias Thorne, was sensational. The Betrayal of Icarus sold for $42 million to a major European collector. Frank, the invisible artist, was instantly elevated to the pantheon of contemporary American masters. The news of the boat shack billionaire and the dramatic betrayal of her greedy family dominated headlines across the country. I took the spotlight with quiet dignity, always redirecting the focus from the money to the mission. I appeared on a major news program, standing in the finished laboratory funded by the first sale, discussing the medical breakthrough Frank had financed. My husband wanted his legacy to be about saving lives, not collecting things, I told the interviewer, my voice calm. This foundation will ensure that every one of his beautiful golden creations goes toward funding technology that will heal the world. They thought they stole his life, but they only helped me finance his true life's work. This was the core of the humanitarian healing twist, using the spectacular, shocking wealth not for personal gain, but for philanthropic good, turning Frank's secret revenge into global change. Meanwhile, the criminal case against David and Jessica moved forward. Maya presented the video evidence, Frank's solemn confession, to the prosecutor's office. The combination of the fraud charges related to trust management and the documented evidence of his poisoning was overwhelming. David's arrogance had led him to believe his brother's body would never be exhumed or tested. He was terribly wrong. Frank had meticulously prepared the evidence, even guiding me to a private, time-stamped medical report hidden within the boat shack vault that detailed his declining health and suspected toxin exposure. The day of the preliminary hearing, David and Jessica looked unrecognizable. The sheen of entitlement was gone. David, pale and drawn, was trying desperately to save his financial career. Jessica was preoccupied with the media circus. I decided to attend. I sat in the front row, not out of malice, but to bear witness. During the hearing, the prosecutor introduced the first piece of evidence, the video confession. The courtroom was hushed as Frank's tired, resolute voice filled the room, describing the slow, agonizing realization that his own brother and niece were killing him. When the tape concluded, Jessica burst into loud, hysterical sobs, and David simply stared straight ahead, rigid with the knowledge that his fate was sealed. Their lawyers, realizing the impossibility of defending the poisoning charge, immediately shifted to negotiating a plea on the fraud and attempted murder charges. The court process was long and messy, but the outcome was certain. They would face significant prison time. Later that week, I went to the dilapidated Hamptons mansion, which was now empty and owned by the bank. I wasn't there to gloat, but for one specific, quiet reason. I had received a letter from Frank's primary lender, informing me that since the Atlas Foundation was now financially solvent and had paid off the initial $6 million mortgage as a gesture of goodwill to the community, the property would be sold at a public auction at a greatly reduced price. I smiled. Frank's plan had always been 2 steps ahead. The bank was desperate to unload the property quickly, now that it was tainted by scandal. I placed a single, anonymous bid through Maya. The bid was ridiculously low, less than half the appraised value. Given the urgency and the controversy, the bank accepted. I bought back the Hamptons mansion. I stood on the beachfront balcony, the crisp ocean air whipping my hair. This house, the symbol of their greed and my suffering, was now mine again, but I had no intention of living there. My home was still the quiet, unassuming boat shack on Fisher's Island, the place where Frank's true heart resided. I had one final symbolic act to perform, completing Frank's vision of justice. The house was mine, and I knew exactly what I was going to do with it. A year passed. David and Jessica had received their sentences. David, for the complex financial fraud and the conspiracy to conceal evidence of his brother's poisoning, was serving 8 years. Jessica, due to her involvement in the public humiliation and aiding the fraud, received 2 years probation and mandatory community service. Justice had been served, but the bitterness in my heart had slowly begun to fade, replaced by the profound sense of purpose Frank had gifted me. The Hamptons mansion, the symbol of their undoing, stood magnificently on the shore, but its purpose had fundamentally changed. I didn't tear it down, I transformed it. Working with the Atlas Foundation Board, I dedicated the mansion to become the Frank Adams Center for Creative Healing, a retreat for artists and innovators dealing with chronic illness, mirroring the very medical field Frank's patent supported. The sprawling rooms, once filled with David and Jessica's empty parties, were now vibrant with workshops, studios, and hope. One afternoon, I was at the center, overseeing the installation of a new bronze plaque, when Maya called. "Beatrice, I have something for you," she said. "It's from Jessica. She sent it from her community service placement at a women's shelter." I hesitated. I hadn't heard from them, nor did I want to. "Did she try to contact me directly?" "No," Maya confirmed. "It was sent through my office. It's a small box." I told Maya to mail it to the boat shack. Later that week, back in the quiet sanctuary of Fisher's Island, I opened the box. It wasn't full of demands or bitter accusations. It contained a small, handmade wooden bird carving, similar to the cedar block I had found when I first arrived at the shack. It was crude and slightly rough, but there was a genuine effort in it. Tucked beneath the bird was a short note, written on the back of a small, blank thank you card. "Aunt Beatrice," the note read, I know words can't fix what I did to you or to Uncle Frank. I see now how hollow that mansion was and how real that little shack is. The boat shack was never worthless. It was only invisible to me. I'm sorry. It was simply signed, Jessica. I held the small carving, turning it over in my hands. It wasn't an apology for the money, but for the blindness. It was a sign that perhaps, through the ashes of their spectacular downfall, some small human seed of understanding had managed to sprout. Forgiveness wasn't for them, it was for me. Frank had achieved his revenge, but more importantly, he had initiated my healing. I realized that my final act wasn't to punish them further, but to embody the grace Frank always possessed. I didn't reply to Jessica directly. Instead, I had Maya arrange an anonymous donation to the women's shelter where Jessica was serving, a donation specifically allocated for their art therapy program. It was a silent acknowledgement, a gesture that allowed for redemption without erasing the consequences of their actions. My days settled into a peaceful routine. I spent my mornings managing the Atlas Foundation's projects, and my afternoons tending the small garden I had cultivated outside the boat shack. The shack itself remained unchanged on the outside, a testament to the fact that appearances often deceive. But inside, the Golden Gallery was now a place of inspiration, a reminder of Frank's incredible love, resilience, and brilliance. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, turning the boat shack a deep, warm gold, I stood at the threshold of the hidden gallery. I had started this journey as a heartbroken widow, banished to a forgotten corner of the world. Now, I was the guardian of a powerful, benevolent legacy. I reached out and gently slid the blue metal panel shut, locking Frank's secrets securely inside. The shack looked like a shack again, silent and unassuming. I had been left for dead on the island, but instead I had discovered the greatest treasure, the capacity to turn profound grief and betrayal into monumental good. The light of Frank's final project had brought true light back into my life. The golden legacy was secure, and I was finally truly home. This is where Beatrice's journey ends, but the story of the Atlas Foundation is just beginning. What did you think of Frank's master plan? Was the debt a fair price for David's betrayal? And do you think Jessica is truly capable of change? Let me know your thoughts on this complex kind of revenge and healing. And don't forget to like this video and share it with someone who needs a reminder that the greatest treasures are often found where we least expect them.